year is being sponsored by Rabbi Dovi Block of Los Angeles, California, in honor of the upcoming bar mitzvah of his son Yaakov next Shabbos. And he says also to cover the chasana of my daughter, which will be this week in Mitzvah Shem on Wednesday. Yeah. And l'schus Achenu b'nei Yisrael hanasunim b'tzaro b'shivya, that everybody should see Yeshuas Hashem keheref ayin. Okay, so this week's Parsha is Parshas Chayei Sara. It's an interesting name, to say the least, for this Parsha, because this Parsha doesn't really deal with the Chayei Sara. The Parsha begins, Chayei Sara is already something of the past. The first pasuk is summing up how many years she lived. So, and nevertheless, the Parsha is called Chayei Sara. Vayiyu Chayei Sara, Me'o Shana, Ve'esrim Shana, Ve'sheva Shanim Shnei Chayei Sara. So Rashi says, Lokach nichtav Shana b'chol klal u'chlal, Me'o Shana, Esrim Shana, Sheva Shanim, Loi malacha shekol echad nidrash la'atzmai. That means to say that it wasn't one continuous life from the beginning to the end. It wasn't one long stream. Kol echad nidrash la'atzmai. There were different. There were separate units of time within her life. But the truth is, how is kol echad nidrash la'atzmai? Rashi says baskuf kebaschov. Baschov kebazayin. So it's all l'chora equal. There are no shinuyim. So it sounds like a tarti de sasri. I mean, the nidrash la'atzmai in itself is to say that it's not la'atzmai. To say that it is one long continuous life, and it was the same from the beginning to the end. It's interesting that the word shana in itself has that contradiction, because shana is a lashon of shana olav hakosav la'akev. It's a lashon of chazara, and on the other hand, it's a lashon of shinui. But the pasuk sums it up, Shnei Chayei Sara, and Rashi says, Kulon Shavin L'Toiva. So on one hand, it's Nidrash La'atzmoi. On the other hand, it's Kulon Shavin. So were the years of her life really Shavin L'Toiva? On the word Vayiyu, says the Balaturim, Minyan Vayiyu, Hein Ike Chayeho, that the gematria of Vayiyu is 37, and that was Iker Chayeho, Mishenoilad Yitzchak. The Bastishim Shona Hoysa Keshenoilad, V'chol Yomeho Kuf Chov Zayin. So she only had 37 years that her life was really considered a life. Yes, so that's why Vayiyu Chayei Sara. This has a source in the Zohar in this week's Parsha. Now, the first 90 years of her life were a life of about which Rachel says, "Im ayin mesa anochi." It wasn't a life. No, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, "Vayiyu Chayei Sara." He says, "Tzorich ladas lama amar vayiyu." V'loy Omar, to say there ha'omar b'chol tzadikim vayechi Adam, vayechi sheis. O yoymar, eila shnei, to say there ha'omar b'Avram. So he says vayiyu is an unusual way of talking about her life. And he says that vayiyu is a lashon tsar, because based on what Chazal say, that ein vayehi el lashon tsar, the Orach Chaim says that vayiyu is a lashon tsar, and he says vayiyu chayei Sara pirish b'tzar hoyu chayei Sara me'oshona. So he makes the Balaturim said that 90 years were B'tzar. He says 100 years were B'tzar. Vayiyu Chayei Sara Mea Shana. That the first Mea Shana of Sarah's life were a life of Vayiyu, a Lashon Tzar, Ki B'chulon Hoysa B'tzar. Why? At Tishim Shana V'hi B'chavlei Leida Shelo Yolda Lavra Utzei Olamad Masha Amra Rachel Havali Bonim V'mayin Meisa Anochi. So the Umi Tishim Ad Mea B'kiruv Shehoyo Yishmol Roidef Es Yitzchok Ka'im Ramzal V'hoysa Mitzta'eres Aladova. So the next 10 years were also not so good because she already had Yitzchak, but Yishmael was still hanging out there. And Yishmael was a bad influence and was a sakana for Yitzchak. So Vayiyu Chayei Sara Mea Shana. Hari Mea Shanim. Ve'esrim Shana Ve'sheva Shanim. Shnei Chayei Sara. The 27 years, that is La'ela Yechoshvu Shnei Chayei Sara Ki Oz Batcha Bivna. Then she had confidence that Yitzchak will grow up the way he ought to grow up. Ki Kvar Gireish Avram Es Yishmael. So the majority of Sarah's life, 90 years or 100 years, her life wasn't really a life. So there were dramatic changes in Sarah's life, and nevertheless, Chazal say that Bas Meya Kibas Esrim Kibas Sheva, and Kulon Shovin, and not only Shovin L'Tova. So how are we meant to understand this? You know, the Medrash Rabbah says in the beginning of the Parshas, Bakiva Hoya Yoshei V'Doresh V'Hatzibur Misnamnein. People were falling asleep while Rabbi Akiva was giving his drasha. Bikesh la'oiron, he wanted to wake them up. So, Omar, ma ro'asa Esther limloich al sheva ve'esrim u'mea medina. How did it come about that Esther was zoiche to be moilech on 127 medinas? Elotavoy Esther, shehoisa bas bito shel Sora, shechoisa mea shona ve'esrim shona ve'sheva shonim, so what's the connection of, Sarah's living 127 years with, and Esther becoming a queen over 127 medinas? And when Rabbi Akiva wanted to shake them up by saying something that doesn't hang together, probably we shouldn't think that way. So it's Yadua in the name of the Chidushei Harim that he said that when they were Bikshu Lehisnamnim, they were falling asleep. Rabbi Akiva wanted to awaken them by telling them the importance of every moment of life, because it was in the merit of the 127 years that Sarah lived the way one should live, that Esther was Moilech al Kufchav Zayin Medinas, which means that every year Sarah with her life conquered another Medina, which means that every month she conquered a county, every day she conquered a city, every hour she conquered a few streets. So when are you Bikshu Lehisnam name? When you're tired as a consequence of the past, you want to have strength for the future. But a person really should realize that in this moment, he's conquering something that is unique, and it's only shaykh to the present moment. It's not shaykh to the past and not shaykh to the future. Like Chazal say, im loy achshav emasai. Just like im ein ani li mili, which means that there are accomplishments that only I can accomplish, and there's nobody else that can do what I can do. Im ein ani li mili doesn't just mean that I won't have it for myself. It means it won't be done. A person has to realize that there are things that are his calling, his mission, and there's nobody else that can do it. It's only he. So Just like im ein anili mili, it's imloi achshavei masai. There's what needs to be accomplished now that can't be accomplished yesterday and can't be accomplished tomorrow. So that's what Rabbi Akiva is trying to teach them. Bikshul Isnamnim, he says, Ma ro'asa Esther, shetimloich al kufchav zayin medinas, tavoi basbita shel Sara shechoisa kufchav zayin shona v'simloich al kufchav zayin medinas, which means that every moment you're conquering something that can't be conquered in any other time. So, if you think about the kufchav zayin medinas, in the end of the day, they remain Kuf Chav Zayin Medinas. The fact that they have one ruler doesn't transform them into one Medina. Yatsev Gevulois Amen. Every Ummah, every Medina has its culture, has its mentality, has its character. As Rashi says in Parshas Shlach on the pasuk Re'isem es ha'oretz mahi, Rashi says Yesh Eretz Migadelas Giborim. V'yesh eretz migadelas chaloshim, yesh migadelas uchlusin, v'yesh mema'etes uchlusin. So it's not like the king makes them all the same, but he leads each one of the medinas in a way that they should use their unique koiches in order to meet the particular challenges that this particular Medina has. So if the Medinas parallel the Shonim, so the pshat is that so it's also with the Shonim. The Shonim are not the same. A person goes through changes in his life. I mean, the yesterday is not the same as the tomorrow. Last year is not the same as next year. And they're not meant to be the same. Kol klal nidrash la'atzmoi. But the greatness of Sara was that in spite of the fact that her life had ups and downs and upheavals and times of illumination and times of darkness, but nevertheless, kulon shavin l'taiva, which means that she always did the right thing. She always did the good thing. Her attitude towards Yoifi when she was 20 was no different than her attitude towards Yoifi when she was 7. And when she was 100, she was as removed from Chet as she was when she was 20. The Medrash Rabbah on the pasuk Vayiyu Chayei Sara, Vayiyu Chayei Sara, brings the pasuk in Tehillim that says Yoidea Hashem Yemei Tmimim. Hashem knows the days of the Tmimim, the perfect, and their inheritance will be forever. So the Medrash brings this pasuk in the beginning of the Parsha on the pasuk Vayiyu Chayei Sara and Darshans Keshem Shehem Tmimim Kach Shnoisam Tmimim Bas Chof Kebas Zayin and Bas Kuf Kebas Esrim. So the Medrash is saying that Yemei Tmimim doesn't mean just the days of the Tmimim, but Yemei Tmimim is days of perfection, perfect days. Yemei Tmimim. That the Tmimim turn their days into perfect days. Because Yoim L'Yoim Yabia Oimer. Every day is a calling. And the Tmimim have Yemei Tmimim. In the end of Masechtas Makos, the Gemara brings Dorash Rebbe Simloi, that Tov Reish Yud Gimel Mitzvahs Nemru Loi LaMoshe B'Sinai Shloish Meos V'Shishim V'Chomesh Lavin Kiminyin Yemois HaChama. There are 365 Lavin that are connected to the Yemois HaChama, the 365 days of the year, of the solar year, and Umasayim V'Arboim Ushmoine Asay Keneged Eivorov Shel Odom. So when we talk about Shem Tmimim, Kach Shnoisam Tmimim, Yemei Tmimim, we're saying that just like all the limbs are Tmimim, the days are Tmimim, because they parallel each other. Kulon Shavin L'Toiva. the Tmimim, I mean, they don't have a bad bone in their body and they don't have a bad day in their life. But, but what does it mean not to have a bad day in your life? What does it mean to have a good day? It's not necessarily that I receive good. It's that I do good. And that's the kulon shavin letoiva, that I do the right thing in every circumstance. So in terms of the circumstances, in terms of the objective reality, it could be that it's vayiyu Chayei Sara. It's a lashon Sara, like the Orach Chaim says. But in terms of the response, which is what makes the Chayei Sara, it's kulon shavin l'toiva. And Yodea Hashem Yemei Tmimim v'nachlosam la'olam tiyeh. The Chayei Sara continue. Her legacy lives on even when Vatomos Sara b'Kiryas Arba. It's still Parshas Chayei Sara. Again, I want to share with you something I heard from my brother Reb Chaim Yisrael, which connects with this. In Parshas Lech Lecha, the pasuk says, "Vayovoy el Hagar vatahar." If the Sara gave Avram the Hagar, and she was vatar, vateira ki harasa, vateikal gevirta be'eineha, vatoimer Sarai el Avram, chamasi olecha, onoichi nosati shivchasi b'cheikecha, vateira ki harasa, vateikal be'eineha. I became cheapened in her eyes. Vataneo Sarai vativrach miponeo. So Rashi says, "Vateikal gevirta be'eineha." Omra. How did Sara become cheapened in Hagar's eyes when she saw that she herself became pregnant? Because Omra Sarai zu ein sisra kigluya. She's not really what she makes out to be. I mean, she's not Mara atzma ki'ilu hi tzadekis ve'ein tzadekis. She gives the impression that she's a tzadekis, but she isn't. She wasn't zoiche lehiroyon all these years. So she's already pregnant and Sarah not. So it must be that she's not such a tzadekis. So the simple understanding of this, maybe the simplistic understanding of this, that Sarah was insulted by what the Hagar said. But why would she be insulted? I mean, did she consider herself a tzadekis? I mean, Chazal say that Arbaim Yoim Kodim Yitziris Avlad Mashbiin Oisoi Tihi Tzadik Va'al Tihi Rosha. Yeah, he should be a tzaddik. But Va'afilu Kol Oilam Oimrim Lecha Tzadik Ato Hayei Beinecha Karosha. A person should never consider himself a tzaddik. So she should have accepted what Hagar is saying as divrei musar, divrei teichecha. Why would she be insulted? So we need to say that she wasn't insulted. The problem that she had with Hagar is that Hagar sees success as a yardstick in terms of evaluating a person's madrega. Yeah, that Hagar says that as opposed to myself, that I was nisabarti mibia rishoina. That convinced Hagar that ein sisra kigluya, that her inside is not like her outside, and she's mara atzma tzadekes, and she really isn't, right? And this goes against the entire chinuch in Avram's house. In other words, we believe that a person is not measured by success. As Chazal say, Loi hamokoy mechabed es ha'odom ela odom mechabed es mekoymoi. What defines a person's madrega is only how he responds to circumstances, not the circumstances that he's put into by the hashgacha. And Lefiza, we could also say that, it's a shtickle, vataneho sorai, vativrach mipaneo. It's a little bit hard to understand. Vataneho sorai. We can maybe make it. She dealt with her harshly, but it's a little hard to understand. So maybe we can make it a bit better by saying that Sarah wanted to give Hagar a chance to rethink her outlook on life. And maybe Hagar will now realize that even a tzaddikus could suffer. Maybe she'll change her attitude. But Hagar wasn't capable. She couldn't deal with adversity. So that's the difference between Sarai and Hagar. So that's the Vayiyu Chayei Sara. It could be Vayiyu in the sense of Ein Vayihi Elo Loshen Tsar, and at the same time, it's Kulon Shavon L'Teva. So Kulon Shavon L'Teva is not about sameness. It's equal but different. It's different but equal. It's making life meaningful in every situation that one is. And there were better years, there were worse years, but Kulon Shavon L'Teva. And that's the foundation of our nation, and that's the foundation of our emunah. That's the Chayei Sara that lives on. And as we say, Hanistori /Shem Elokeinu. I mean, the how we're treated, that's in the realm of Hanistori /Shem Elokeinu. V'haniglois lonu ulvaneinu lasois es kol divrei haTorah azois. What we know is the lasois es divrei haTorah azois, regardless of where and how things are. You know, I just want to add, in the end of the parsha, the last pasuk in the parsha, the last pasuk in the parsha talk about the death of Yishmael, the son of Hagar, and it says about his descendants, "Vayishkenu mechavilo ad shur, asher al pnei Mitzrayim, boyacho ashura al pnei kol echov nofal." So the Targum says nofal is shochan, means that's where they lived, they dwelt. And Rashi brings a few examples of the word nofal in the sense of shochan. But then Rashi adds in the name of the Midrash, kan hu oimer loshin nefila, and earlier it says al pnei kol echov yishkoin in Parshas Lech Lecha, ad sheloi mes Avram yishkoin, but mishem mes Avram nofal. In other words, according to this, nofal is really in the sense of falling. In the Hemshich of the Medrash, which Rashi doesn't quote, it says, "Ba'olam hazeh yishkoin, aval osid lovoi nofal." But the Balaturim writes as follows. The Balaturim writes, "Al pnei kol echad nofal, v'samich lei eila toldos Yitzchak." That right after the Al pnei kol echad nofal, in the end of Parshas Chayei Sara, comes the pasuk in the beginning of Parshas Toldos, eila toldos Yitzchak. Says the Balaturim, Loy Malacha, K'sheyipol Yishmael ba'achris hayomim, oz Yitzmach ben David, shehu mitoldos Yitzchak. So this is really an original drush of the Balaturim. What's so interesting about this is because not only that it's, it sounds so appropriate for our times, but l'chara, in the end of the Goliath, the Malchus Haravius is Edom. So, how did the Balaturim make the Tzmichas Keren David connected with the Nefila of Yishmael? So, the truth is that the Ibn Ezra in Daniel, Capital Zion, Pasuk Yudalid, says that the fourth Chaya in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar is the Malchus of Yishmael. And so also he says in Parshas Lech Lecha, Tes Zion Yud Beis on the Pasuk V'hu Yiyeh Pere Odom, that the Malchus Revius is Yishmael. But the Ramban in Parshas Bolok, Chof Dalet Chof, argues very strongly against the Ibn Ezra. He says that the Malchus Revius is Edom and Roimi, and he writes B'zeh Aloshen, V'Rebbi Avrom nishtabesh b'zeh. Yeah, that Rabbi Avram, the Ibn Ezra, got this wrong. V'hichnis b'zeh Malchus Yishmael. He nofal pachdom olav. In other words, how did the Ibn Ezra come to this? He's accusing him, or really apologizing for him, that he came to this because nofal pachdom olav. V'toan eich loy timon Malchus gedoyla v'atzuma kamoyu. The Ibn Ezra couldn't accept that a Malchus gedoyla v'atzuma, as Yishmael shouldn't be included in the four Chayes, and therefore he said that it's Yishmael, but it's not so. But this is the Ibn Ezra who lived in Spain in the time of the Islamic conquests, and that's what he's saying. Nofal pachdom aleim, and therefore he Olav, and therefore he put Yishmael into Nebuchadnezzar's dream. But the Tur, Rabbi Yaakov Balaturim, the son of the Rosh, he lived in Germany, in a sriva that was completely Christian, and nevertheless he's somehow connected Bias HaMashiach to the downfall of Yishmael. And this is in spite of the fact that in Parshas Va'era, Vav, he says like the Ramban that the fourth Malchus is Edom. And nevertheless, he somehow inserts over here that the Nefila of Yishmael is the key to Bias HaMashiach. It's like an Nevuah Ktana. In any case, the Eibush Zalhalfen, we should be Zoiche to see all this with our own eyes. Ve'inenu sechzena b'shuvcha l'tzion b'rachamim. Meher b'yameinu.